Welcome to the X Global News Channel. A large Russian strike force is indeed forming in the Gorlovka-Alchevsk area. Part of the units that retreated from Kherson and the Kherson region, fresh motorized rifle and amphibious assault units, with a large number of mobilized in the composition, are drawn into it. According to Russian staff officers, this group is going and will be thrown forward after Bakhmut is taken under control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Fresh forces are needed. A massive attack will give results. Ukrainians are also exhausted already. There is no one else to give us the mass stupidly. And there are fresh troops in the rear, but they will be allowed only after we take Artemovsk. How many times have they already turned to the headquarters of the group and to Elda, the nickname of General Surovikin, they send us the fuck? Well, in general, they organized victory reports that we had almost won, hoping that they would move the strike group forward and we would solve the problem due to this. There were some big shoulder straps involved, we only had a rustle here. Let's see if it worked out or not. It will be clear before the beginning of December, says a staff officer of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Manipulation of command decisions using the resource of military commanders and fake reports on successes is a common phenomenon for the entire grouping of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in Ukraine. According to staff officers and unit commanders, the real situation on the front line and in the immediate rear is sometimes diametrically opposed to how it is seen in Moscow or even in the headquarters of the group. According to a source in the General Staff, who is on the front line and keeps in touch with officers on the ground, stability in the east is held on a thin thread, but the head of the General Staff Gerasimov and Surovikin himself assess the situation as stable and even make plans for offensive actions. Somehow, the APU was slowed down near Svatovo and Kremenaya, and the mobilized were stuffed into all holes. At the cost of heavy losses in the DSHB and special units, they achieved progress in Belagorovka and west of Lysychansk. This has worked now, while the Ukrainians have not yet inflicted a single serious blow. As soon as they strike, we will get a defense breakthrough and another missile defense. B. But this is not the case here at meetings. There are reports on the reinforcements that have arrived, supplies of ammunition and equipment are being made, a group is being formed for an offensive at the end of December on Bakhmut-Kramatorsk-Slavyansk. This is déjà vu since the beginning of the war. Our people plan their actions at all without correlating with what is happening in the front, with the plans of the enemy. We so fucked up near Kiev, then near Kherson, when we planned our offensive, not taking into account Ukrainian actions, then near Kharkov, explains the officer of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. Propaganda and the authorities of the DPR reported that the armed forces of the Russian Federation had decisively advanced in Marinka and were successfully developing the offensive. In fact, the offensive of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this area was met by a counterattack of the armed forces of Ukraine, and the battles for Mariinka are going on with varying success for both sides, but the advance of Russian troops has been stopped. The goal of the Russian offensive on Mariinka, reaching the rear of the Ukrainian units at Ugledar, has remained unrealized so far. The APU has transferred fresh forces to this direction. Attempts by the armed forces of the Russian Federation to bypass and surround Avdiivka were also unsuccessful. Moreover, the constant counterattacks of the AFU at the base of the ledge southwest of Avdiivka may lead to the fact that the armed forces of the Russian Federation will be forced to abandon all recently captured positions and the front line will return to the same place where it was in August. In terms of the number of troops and artillery involved, Avdiivka is inferior to Bakhmut, but the fighting is going on daily and their tension is only increasing. We are waiting for the weather. When it freezes normally, it will be possible to use equipment more actively and it will be easier for the infantry. This trampling on the spot has already bothered us and the Rashists, says a Ukrainian officer serving in a tank unit. Russian officers are also waiting for frosts and hope that after that they will have the opportunity to actively use armored vehicles. In the southern direction, the Russian armed forces are trying to build defenses west and northwest of Mariupol, as well as west and north of Berdyansk and Melitopol. The Russian military is waiting for offensives from two sides. From Guliaipol and Zaporizhzhia and from Kakhovka and Kherson, and they are also afraid of landings or a full-scale crossing of the AFU across the Dnieper in the areas of Dudchan and Nikopol. There are still few Russian troops in the occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region and confusion continues, when units from the Crimea are then driven to Melitopol and Tokmak, then sent back. A herd of hedgehogs there, a herd of hedgehogs here. In the morning they drive the brigade from Armyansk, the next morning they drive it back. And so it is almost every day. Combat-ready units from Kherson pass through us to the east or left for Belarus. From the Kherson region, they go to the Crimea. And we live here, then we are rich and get mobs for earthworks, says a Russian officer who is in the vicinity of Melitopol. According to him, earthworks have been deployed in many places, but they are being conducted chaotically and, in the event of an APU offensive in December, they simply will not have time to be completed. The General Staff considers Melitopol an important node of defense, which must be held so that the APU could not cut the Russian grouping into two parts, but they are much more focused on preventing the APU from reaching the Sea of Azov. You can't hold Melitopol if they come at it from two sides. There's just no one to hold it. We have been here since the beginning of the war in the role of poor relatives. Our troops were taken to Kherson, then to the DPR. Now they've come to their senses. But I don't believe in defense here, and I don't see it. They will hold Berdyansk and the coast, because they will let Ukraine to the Sea of Azov, the Crimean Bridge Pie. Yes. That's where the lane will be held exactly by ours. And we're saying here that we're here forever. Until the new year, says an officer of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in Melitopol. In the territory east of Melitopol, fresh units of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, including those recruited from both prisoners and mobilized, began to be transferred from the beginning of November. The poor quality of the officers led to a loss of discipline in many units. And this has caused an increase in violence against the local population. Individual cases of murders and robberies of residents of the Zaporizhzhia region are recorded even by the Russian media. The combat capability of such units is close to zero, but this does not make it easier for the civilian population in the occupied territories, but even more difficult. They wander around the village, drink, take what they want, aggressive, says a resident of one of the settlements east of Melitopol. The Ukrainian military refrains from making detailed comments about their plans in occupied Zaporizhzhia and in the south in general, but they hint that they are waiting for the weather, and almost everything is ready for the planned offensive at the end of summer. The situation may change only if the AFU has to transfer troops to other directions. Among the Ukrainian officers with whom we managed to communicate, there is a strong mood that they will meet the second half of winter already on the shore of the Sea of Azov. While Kherson will continue to be slowly cleared, on the left bank of the Dnieper, Special Operations Forces and Army Intelligence are gradually studying the extensive minefields left by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, choosing places for setting up crossings and trying out the forces of Russian posts in villages along the Dnieper. There is an atmosphere of expectation in Novaya Kakhovka, Oleshki, Berpir, and other coastal villages. In villages and settlements in the very south of the Kherson region, horror and fear. Even before the retreat from Kherson, the Russian military used the south of the region as a convenient place for filtration, torture, and mass graves. Now the brutality against the civilian population has only intensified. Given that there is no government in the villages in the south of the region, except for the military, crimes are regularly committed there. We assume that after the liberation of the Kherson region, more than 1 or 10 graves of murdered locals and prisoners of war will be found in villages west of Mykolaiv. These assumptions are based on the stories of Russian officers who served before the retreat in Kherson and the Kherson region. The AFU managed to convince the armed forces of the Russian Federation and a number of military experts that the Dnieper is an almost insurmountable obstacle. In fact, he was not at either for the armed forces of the Russian Federation, which were stationed in Kherson and supplied through crossings, or for the AFU, capable of organizing the transfer of troops to the left bank in a few days. According to the Ukrainian military, they are waiting for developments in other areas, after which they will finally be able to move forward. There are a number of small bridgeheads on the left bank, which we are gradually expanding. The side is under control. We are saving up our strength, preparing, waiting, says the Ukrainian officer. Ukrainian artillery and MLRS covered the entire territory of the left bank to Skedovsk with fire. Armyansk and Zhenichevsk are regularly shelled. The Russian armed forces withdrew almost all artillery from the left bank, leaving only a few self-propelled guns for shelling Kherson and the right bank. The peninsula is being prepared for defense in the area of Armyansk, Zankoy, Chang'ar and the Old Ishin positions. Motorized rifle and newly formed units of the armed forces of the Russian Federation are being transferred to the Crimea. At the same time, the officers are confident that the AFU will be able to break through the defense with one massive blow. In this case, the point in the defense of the Crimea will be the loss of Zankoy. After that, there will simply be no way to hold Sevastopol and other cities. The Russian military hopes that the Ukrainian armed forces will be afraid to go on the offensive in Crimea, because in this case the Russian Federation can launch tactical nuclear strikes on Ukraine. The APU refuses to answer about the Crimea, and they say about tactical nuclear strikes that the APU General Staff is seriously considering such a possibility and the country is preparing for this development of events already in January. You can expect anything. In November, the Russians repeatedly used missiles that can carry a nuclear charge, while with conventional warheads. We looked at how effectively we can deal with them. I know that work is underway to prepare shelters, the air defense and missile defense capabilities are being increased. The recent rocket attacks are aimed not only at the energy sector, they are aimed at identifying our defense systems. We see and understand this, says a source in the Ukrainian Air Force. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and see you again.